game or something or watch stuff. But yeah, just chilling in the stream right now, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if anyone wants to come chill and hang out. So let me switch over to video watching. And is this what I was watching? Maybe it was this. Oh no, everything's frozen. Doesn't want to work. Okay, stream's over, guys. I'm kidding. It is a little laggy though.
Something you hear coffee people say all the time is that the grinder is way more important than the espresso machine. And if you gave them a really good grinder and a cheap espresso machine, they'd make better espresso.
Oh, I see. It was
Little House.
trying to load.
What I want to know is just how cheap you can go on the espresso machine if you've got a good grinder and still get something drinkable. Here are 5 different espresso machines, each under £100 and one good little grinder. Starting here with the Swan Retro, that was £90. The DeLonghi is the most expensive of the bunch at $99.99, scraping in by a penny. The Krups, £90. The Amazon Basics, £65. That's really cheap, but not as cheap as the Andrew James, which came in at £60. When you buy an expensive coffee machine, you're buying precision, consistency, and control. That is not present, I suspect, on any of these things. One more little frustration is that 4 of these 5 machines have what are called pressurized portafilters. Now, these are portafilters designed, presumably you at home can't grind coffee and you're probably buying coarsely ground, pre-ground coffee. Typically, pressurized portafilters work well with coarsely ground coffee. They don't make particularly good tasting coffee, but they do make fluffy crema. Most of the time.
Fluffy crema.
I'll see if I can hack my way around them.
Muffle crema
to get the best out of them. First up is the Swan. The build, cheap, plastic everywhere. 2 of the buttons, when you push them, they stay depressed in, suggesting that they are on, except the power button.
Oh, they stay depressed.
Which is confusing.
That's sad.
The temperature gauge seems nice, but goes in 40 degrees Celsius increments, but it is not particularly stable in terms of temperature. It has a pressurized portafilter. It's got this additional piece screwed to the bottom, and it has a little extra filter inside it. I don't know why this is there. I don't like it. It also has a little rubber gasket inside the brew basket. I don't want rubber inside my brewing environment. I'm just not a fan of that. So can this pull good espresso? Loading this is not much fun. I think you're supposed to use the spoon it comes with, which is a shape that makes me slightly uncomfortable. And at the bottom of this is a tamper, which I would say is deeply unpleasant to use.
Slightly uncomfortable.
It takes about
pants down MacGuffin here.
And the best shots that I got out.
Put your pants on, bro.
40 grams of liquid, but pretty fast shots too.
What's that? The DeLonghi?
Nice fluffy crema. But
I think I had this espresso maker.
Tastes.
Or no, it's Swan, I guess.
Fine, but a bit dull. If you try and pull a normal shot, let's say 12 in, 30 grams out in 28 seconds, it tastes very weak, very hollow, very empty. Something goes wrong in the brewing process.
Kyonko movie antenna.
But it just doesn't work.
What is that? Is that a reference I don't get?
This one, don't like finely ground coffee, slow traditional espresso. If you were going to turn this into a milk drink, maybe it would be okay, but in terms of good espresso, no. I could not get good espresso from this coffee machine. Next up is the DeLonghi. Now this was the most expensive of the 5, and it does come with a proper basket. This means that I can put properly ground, finely ground coffee into it. It means that I, in theory, could make
so it's not a
good espresso. This basket sits in a very annoying way in this portafilter. It drops in, some little tabs lined up, and it sits inside, but it will always just fall out. So, like all the other portafilters,
oh, that's the one I had,
to hold it in place when you knock it out. That is very unpleasant as an experience. The machine itself is also a challenge. Really light, and that's it. There's no gauge, there's no information there. You just have to hope that you're getting a good temperature. It's very noisy. The whole machine shakes.
Yep.
It doesn't feel particularly well built. The design of the interior of this,
but I got it. It was like
very easy for liquid to be
I think it was like
retained
$60 or
inside
something when I
that,
bought it.
over
So
time, will dry, crust on. That's a weird little design flaw. The tamper on this thing is mounted to the machine. Ergonomically, that's a mess. I don't like having to put my hand on top of a warm-ish machine to push down again. So I'll pull something.
yeah, mine didn't have that
14
though.
in, 28 to 30 grams out in about 25 to 30 seconds. Somewhere in that ballpark is what I think we'll get.
It's sitting behind me taken apart because since I've been off work, that was a project I tried to do, is see if I could fix that espresso machine, because it's kind of garbage. But yeah, she's dead. It was dead.
Yeah, okay. It's okay. For $99.99, if you're willing to put in the effort, you might get some okay results. The shots looked good, tasted okay. Good espresso, not great espresso, is possible.
But yeah, it's like, it's not bad.
Next up is the
I mean,
cross.
if
So
you
this costs £90,
like
just like the Swan
espresso
we looked at.
and you find a lot of other places don't make a good one, it's not bad.
So I thought this was going to be a bit of deja vu. I bet you thought I was going to say deja brew, but I didn't.
Deja brew! Ha ha ha! Alright, let's watch some
Cheers.
Curse commercials. Those are more fun. Oh, wait, actually, I gotta watch this first.
Welcome to my epic assessment of all the superhero movies from the year 2019. This is an annual video series that documents my thoughts on the ever-growing collection of these films that are pumped out every year, in an attempt to see if they are generally getting better, more tiresome, or simply staying the same. 2019 was about as packed as 2018 was, with a slightly more varied selection that branches off beyond action or comedy, to mixed degrees of success. Personally, it was a fairly weak year for what I'm looking for out of these types of movies, but there are a couple I still enjoy nonetheless. Anyway, I'm going to be talking about the 2019 films in order, starting with my least favorite and gradually going through, you guessed it, to my favorite. If you don't care about the film I'm talking about or simply want to pick and choose based around which movies you're interested in, there are time codes in the description for each separate movie. Also note, I'm not including Hellboy in this video because I've talked about it before in my worst of 2019 video, so go watch that.
So I'm trying to get my
it'll be near the bottom of this list.
I'm trying to get my
that said,
3D
let's start
avatar
with what I
going, but
think
it's
is the
not
weakest
cooperating right
superhero
now for
movie
some
of
reason.
2019 and go from there. Also note, I'll be spoiling elements of these movies, so you've been warned. You've had plenty of time. M. Night uses the third movie in the East Rail 177 trilogy to shock us with the knowledge that comic books have tropes.
That sounds like the bad guys teaming up.
Unbreakable was a fresh spin on a genre that wasn't nearly as prevalent in cinema as it is today, whereas Split was a fairly entertaining thriller with the twist being that it was actually set in the same universe as Unbreakable. In between Unbreakable and Glass is an entire 19 years worth of superhero renaissance that has shifted pop culture to the point where the nerd schlock you used to get bullied for liking is now what's widely popular. So when we get to Glass and they treat this meta comic book commentary as if we're still in the golden or silver age of comic books.
And then Action Comics #1 launched, with the man in the cape and the blue tights on the cover. Booyah! Here we are.
I'm leaving.
It makes the film come across as if it's completely ignorant to its contemporaries.
What?
You believe water is your weakness.
And even if you're not
Okay,
twinged
so
by
apparently
the
all I
lack
had
of
to do was,
subtlety or wit behind the obvious themes,
This was an origin story. The whole time.
I'm leaving.
what you're left with is a poorly executed drama with mystery elements that never feel surprising or earned. Sorry about that, M. Night.
What the
Do I
twist?
know you? Did you used to work at the football stadium?
Despite being the title character, Mr. Glass doesn't actually say a single word until over an hour into the runtime. What makes up this dead hour is a collection of scenes that pose the question that the three superpowered individuals might in fact be mentally ill all along, and they've perhaps imagined their superpowered realities. This is a story element I could imagine working if this trilogy was more cohesive and not written around twists or reveals being the pinnacle of what their stories have to offer, but it doesn't. So, it's stupid.
I truly am a mastermind.
Bruce Willis is doing what modern Bruce Willis does best in looking like a jaded old man who is clearly only there for one reason. James McAvoy is a great performer, obviously as is Samuel Jackson and Bruce Willis when he wants to be, but his character here doesn't particularly have room to grow, aside from a retroactive Fast and Furious tier reveal, where it turns out that Sam Jackson was responsible for killing James McAvoy's father, which means he's responsible for everything.
Dun dun dun.
As I created David.
In truth, the real villain here is the script, which has no clear momentum, feels stitched together, and is simultaneously being pulled in countless directions. Are you a small-budget Blumhouse mystery thriller set in some spooky mental institute? Are you a sequel to Unbreakable? Are you a continuation to Split? Are you a small-scale psychological thriller that tests the minds of the main characters? Are you a large-scale superhero tale around commenting on genre tropes in a crowded, cynical market? Maybe if the dialogue wasn't attempting this obnoxious cleverness quite as much, then I would have been okay with it.
A collection of main characters.
Or at least more okay with it. But otherwise, it's an utterly forgettable, belated entry into a crowded genre that doesn't need it. I would not recommend this movie to anyone, especially to those who are fans of Unbreakable and or Split.
The power of true, loving, physical affection.
What?
Like something supernatural.
Why did it exit that for that?
Superman was a satanic sociopath, murderer, maniac, is the best way to summarize Brightburn. Made on a micro budget and the clout of riding off the loose connection.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with this app. It's just being really stupid lately.
Kind of supervillain horror story. It seems like work never delved much
deeper. I have to uninstall and reinstall or something. I don't know.
You get a fairly surface level plot that is more interested in rushing to get to the slasher movie kills and exploitation of the subject instead of anything with a little more complexity.
It's weird. Like I don't know why I'm getting an announcement when I put it into airplane mode.
Especially bothered by some of the dialogue and performances.
He's so different.
It's called puberty.
It came across as if the more well-known actors signed on to the movie as a favor, as there really isn't much more to glean from the movie than the premise. Some of the B-movie level kills are humorous here and there. Oh look, it's Badger. But I think this idea would be better suited to a more concise short, or given to a team to develop into something with a little bit more direction and personality and breadth. As it stands though, I think this concept is better left to your imagination. I can't help but feel sorry for this movie. I don't know what it is about it, but it feels as if it's been defeated, trodden on.
My emotions make me strong.
The colour and life is so rare from this franchise at this point, that by this entry, it really is not surprising that events transpired the way they did.
This primitive species.
To be as fair as possible to the film, not only was it going up against one of the most anticipated event movies of all time, while also containing similarities so severe to Captain Marvel that huge portions of the film had to be reshot and moved around, as well as being the sequel to the largely disregarded X-Men Apocalypse, as well as this being the second adaptation of the Dark Phoenix storyline on the big screen. Oh yeah, and let's not forget, this was also post the news that Disney bought Fox, so this universe was on the chopping block, no matter how good it was. This entire project was fucked from the start. It's a shame too, as much as the quality shifts wildly around these X-Men movies, there were some genuinely quite good ones. So it is kind of disappointing that this is the full stop it ends on. This movie treats its characters as if they're more familiar to us than they actually are. In fact, for the Dark Phoenix storyline to have any impact, it's fairly essential for you to be invested in a number of different characters, least of all being Jean Grey herself, who I suppose is kind of the protagonist?
You're a little intimidated, maybe.
Who we were only introduced to in the forgettable previous entry, which I already mentioned was a pretty bad movie. The story itself has some
like even the whole Dark Phoenix comic.
Having to overcome
God, why does it just not want to work? What the hell?
Deal with past mistakes is alluring.
Sorry guys, I'm trying to have a live avatar, but
frustrating way. And as usual, when the best characters from the series are on screen, it tends to be a lot more entertaining.
You messed with the mind of an 8-year-old girl. You pushed down.
However, the core of the movie is Jean Grey and her entanglement with the Dabari, a race of shape-shifting aliens who were originally going to be the Skrull, but Captain Marvel used them, so they had to change it. Feels like a lot of development is missing from this movie. Not that I particularly want it to be any longer, but there's a jumbled messiness to its goals that leave it being overall unsatisfying. For some incredibly confusing reason, the director decided to take
my tech budget is pretty low right now, like next to zero, so I'm doing good to even have this much, to be honest.
With the Western-inspired dirt and
I guess it's okay. It's not like I'm trying to
they
to
were going
demand
for
a huge
that
fan
story.
base and
Shooting everything
like,
handheld, intimate, lifeless, and colorless for
you
an
know,
X-Men
just having
story
fun.
as grand in scope as Dark Phoenix was clearly a mistake. If they'd taken any aspect from Logan, I wish it was the appreciation for the smaller scale, more character-driven stories that lean away from the apocalyptic superhero movie outcomes, but that's not the reality we live in, so we're left with this. And neither a Hans Zimmer score nor the gravitas of some of the cast can carry this material. It's just dead on arrival. Sometimes a project just doesn't come together. I do feel for the director given the context of the situation, as trying to play anything from the horrendous set of cards he was dealt must have been horrifying. Despite it all though, at least our emotions keep us strong.
My emotions make me strong.
Now I usually don't bother with these straight-to-video animated DC or Marvel movies, but something about this one caught my eye. It seems like such a long time since Batman has been in anything watchable. I have a fond memory of the 90s animated Batman series and movies like Mask of the Phantasm, and wanted to see what the kids these days are getting in comparison. Let's just say it's different.
Sure you can. Ass.
First off, and this could be personal bias talking, but I really am not the biggest fan of the art direction of Hush and this tier of DC animated movie. I don't think it's bad particularly, it just seems to be limited. My bigger issue than any artistic taste though is with where they choose to take the Hush story compared to the more well-known version fanboys like me might know. I'm not particularly a purist of the source material by any means, but that is with the caveat that you justify the changes you make based on the medium you're working in. But if you're selling a story based on a known comic and then right at the end you change it for the sake of misdirection, then you're falling into a similar trap that Arkham Knight did, but kind of in reverse. Instead of promising something new and delivering a reskin of a well-known story, they're promising something familiar and delivering a mix-up that entirely changes the story. Perhaps if they'd just gone for a different name other than Batman Hush, then this wouldn't have bothered me as much. Aside from that, this story has a lot of characters in it, so it can feel overly stuffed and kind of like a crossover event. There's a lot of fan service and some wince-worthy dialogue.
Say, perfect. Perfect.
They really lean hard into the tween edginess with the sex and death, which can be a little distracting when at the same time they're spouting despicable Me Too lines such as,
You and Selena. Bruce Lena?
If they didn't change the story around, then I probably would have enjoyed it a little more, but as it is, I can't say that my journey back into the DC animated catalogue was worth my time. There was also a Justice League and Wonder Woman animated movie that came out the same year, but I don't have the fortitude to sit through any more than what is truly relevant or necessary. I already had to watch Glass, already had to rewatch Captain Marvel, and if they're all like this, what's even the point?
Sure you can. Ass.
I can't help but think the positioning of Captain Marvel is what sours it the most. The insistence to interrupt the story we care about for a mostly unrelated flashback that primarily exists to set up Deus Ex Machinas in future movies is a huge slight against this story and any potential it could have. By no means is it offensively bad, it's just kind of a Thor tier Marvel origin fish out of water movie, wedged in between two juggernauts of build-up. Who thought that was a good idea? Oh, it made $1 billion, whatever. I simply do not care about the protagonist, I'm sorry. Let's start with her powers. She's gifted with the power of having cosmic abilities because she's absorbed the energy from a Tesseract-derived speed engine, which gives her the unique talent of being able to smash things really hard. That's how she solves every issue, just smash it.
Yeah, like,
I will burn you to the ground.
even in the
To me,
comics,
her
Miss Marvel
superheroes
is
have some
kind of
hook or
disliked
flaw to
because
their
she's
character that
pretty
makes them
one-dimensional.
inherently magnetic. The Hulk is torn between bodies like Jekyll and Hyde. Spider-Man is just an ordinary kid who has to juggle the responsibility of being a hero with school life. Captain Marvel has amnesia. Everyone's favorite backstory, the amnesia backstory. But not only does she have amnesia, but by the end of the movie, she remembers every detail of her life. So she's actually.
So I think what happened is Marvel was trying to look through their studio of people and stuff they had, and it's like, oh man, we actually have really lagged on developing solid female characters, so we need to pick out something here, and this was what they came up with, and it's like, wish you could have done better if you're gonna do like something and push it as like your female action lead movie.
Role.
My name is Carol.
The movie almost seems self-aware of how tepid it is, doing everything in its power to take your mind off the main character's journey. They do this by relegating most of the substance to the supporting roles. Barely half an hour passes before Mr. Glass hijacks the movie to turn it into this light-hearted buddy cop type of action spectacle. One side of the story I genuinely did quite enjoy was the spin on where they decided to take the Skrull shape-shifting aliens. They look goofy and ridiculous, sure, but they found a fresh angle to take these creatures that the MCU hasn't really explored before. It's a shame that the other pillars of the movie were not as satisfying or surprising though. The humor is bloody all over the place. It's about as broad as you'd expect.
Yes, that's right.
I had to sleepwalk my way through the second viewing of this movie. The first time around I was kind of led along.
It's like it's a really hard discussion to have because
now the dust has settled, it does seem quite apparent.
You don't want to come across like you're against having movies with strong female action star superhero characters. I like that kind of thing.
They've got their work
but
for them if they plan to have
when they assume that because they've kind of filled in these blanks with it, and they haven't taken the effort to color it and make it colorful, it just comes across as like very black and white.
A little less weighty, more silly. Just a stupid comic book movie. It took me a couple of rewatches to enjoy Spider-Man Homecoming, but unfortunately I kind of had the opposite happen here. Once I saw this in theaters, I quite enjoyed it, but upon rewatching at home, I have to say I wasn't nearly as pleased with how this sequel shakes out. It has a very similar feel to Homecoming, not surprisingly, as much of the same crew returned, which in turn brings with it similar criticisms. The production is equally flat as it is bland.
It's clear to me that you were not ready for this.
The overall lack of energy to the presentation does the character a real disservice. This is Spider-Man. It is irritating once you notice how a lot of the dialogue scenes are just two cameras, shot reverse shot, especially when you contrast that to how much more creative and free the movement is when everything in the movie turns into a computer-generated cartoon. Obviously, the villain of the week this time is Mysterio, which is a classic Spidey story that they do a decent job of.
So basically, they spent all their time making sure the action scenes look good, and then it's like, okay, we got to fill in the blanks with the actual humans now. All right, let's get this over with. Sigh.
Where it's about the hero having a crisis of faith in themselves, but instead of learning to become the best Spider-Man he can be, he more transitions into being the best Iron Man he can be. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it does seem pretty blatant that this movie is more of a platform to establish Spider-Man as one of the new mainstay characters to fill the boots of Iron Man. Tom Holland is only young, so he's got, what, 30 more Spider-Man movies left in him? I'm conflicted on how to feel about this Iron Spider-Man thing.
Apparently someone's been reading
based on the Peter they've set up in this universe specifically.
Someone's been reading Superior Spider-Man because it looks like they're really
this weird little
tackling that
constantly lives in his shadow.
time where Dr. Octopus switched bodies with Spider-Man.
An hour before the fun side of the plot kicks in. I gotta say the first act in particular drags on rewatch. The whole weapon glasses plot device was very cartoony, and there were just too many moments of tiresome conflict that were derived in an extremely forced way. It's one of those stories that gets worse and more stupid the more you think about it. The humor was a little bit better than the average Marvel movie, because luckily the cast is a lot of humorous people with fairly good chemistry. There are definitely some stinker jokes in there though. I might be sounding overly harsh on this movie because I do
M. Morales shocks. I'm reporting for copyright.
It's as good as Homecoming, and I definitely do not feel the need to revisit this anytime soon. I do think the after credits scene was a nice bit of fan service, and it sets up the next movie to potentially be a lot of fun. Oh yeah, and it was funny how Peter refers to his dick as a web shooter.
It's a little tight around the old web shooter.
Randomly, this is the second superhero movie on this list to contain a car crash caused by a small child, although this time the movie is a lot more entertaining. Shazam works because it has a great hook. A kid that can effectively turn into Superman with the utterance of a single word is a cute idea. They have fun with the premise and apply just the right amount of motivation and melodrama to make this a pleasant experience. This movie has less smooth edges compared to some of the other titans on this list. However, the humor and tone stay consistent and likable throughout. The tone is a lot more comedically successful than the more recent DC offerings, if you ignore the inherent humor in what they've been attempting. So it's about time one of these movies established a character I actually want to see more of, who has a fun gimmick that is plenty
I know
of
you were
room for
joking. That's
setups in the
alright.
future.
Thank you.
Mark Strong is given a surprising amount of screen time, which helps to establish the motivations and
Is
tribulations
it
of the character. I always enjoy seeing him do
M.
his thing.
Morales
I enjoy the way they
Hawks?
deal with magic, in which they basically don't explain anything and mostly leave it to your imagination. The film has fairly simple rules to it, so the antics involving Shazam,
I mean, even if you did report this
this
for copyright, like, it's a pretty open and shut case because I'm doing a criticism, my own thing here, so that qualifies it under free use or whatever. The biggest issue would be if the guy who runs I Hate Everything had an issue with it, then he could ask for a takedown. But I'm not really trying to profit off of him. I'm hoping people, you know, like this video and are like, oh, who is this? And
in a time where every other superhero movie
I'm not really a reaction channel. It's just sometimes I don't feel like playing games, but I still want to stream, so I just kind of watch stuff. Reaction channels to me are people that like kind of use it as an excuse to just watch something like a little more, what do you call it? Big budget, like it's like something that would be like movie theaters, or you're just literally listening to like full albums. Because this is like basically just trying to give some.
Mark Strong as the villain.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like when you say reaction video, it's actually videos where people don't react. It's a derogative term for people who don't add any content to stuff. So it's funny because we say reaction video, but they actually don't react.
It just feels like a classic superhero movie. On Sardonicast, where I co-host with YMS and Ralph the Movie Maker, we did an interview.
But yeah,
with
for
the
one thing, I want to
director,
bring,
David F. Sandberg, which you should check out.
like I'm just trying to get some more attention to I Hate Everything because his videos are awesome.
Phoenix film.
I know he's pretty well known.
Points for originality, but
you know, it's like managing a TV channel sort of.
Seriously, with a bunch of socio-political commentary, and then it gets a thumbs up. I've seen it twice now, and I felt pretty similar on both viewings. Even bringing up the Taxi Driver and King of Comedy comparisons is a dead topic at this point, but it's specifically the direct similarities with the King of Comedy's story structure that bothered me the most. I guess I was more just shocked that when they said they were taking inspiration from intimate Martin Scorsese character studies, that they would be quite so literal. Besides, the movie doesn't even attempt to hide its connections to Scorsese at all. In fact, it embraces its similarities with direct acknowledgement through the form of De Niro playing a very similar character to the one he himself harassed in King of Comedy. The pessimist in me flashes forward to a future where we've exhausted all sources of mindless spectacle, thus have to farm heralded films for their narrative frameworks to build spin-off superhero-related properties around. The optimist in me hopes that the other studios will probably take away the wrong aspects from the success of this movie, and that ultimately probably won't.
We need to just make edgy superhero movies. That's what the kids like. They just want lots of dark, depressing bullshit.
Countless people, even if I'm a little more mixed on it myself. I joked earlier about Joaquin Phoenix, but he really is the donkey who is carrying this movie on his back. His performance is frightening and vulnerable when it needs to be. The payoff of the movie for me is the haunting moment where Joker murders De Niro. The build-up and culmination is satisfying to witness. There's a purposefully overbearing and edgy comic book tone, with the intense music and the beauty and the filth and grime of the city. Production-wise, it's certainly much more interesting and moody than anything else on this list. The spin on Joker's laugh is possibly the most ingenious thing about it, portraying a beaten, tortured soul who has a crippling condition that forces him to laugh about it, has a nice tinge of irony, and obviously leads to some creepy and inappropriate moments that build a lot of personality for the character. Somehow everything about this movie was iconic, for good or bad, from the moment.
But yeah,
the
that was a
trailers
good take. Their
appeared.
idea
The
to
memes and arguments and ridiculous news story this movie caused
create that
kind of
sympathetic
makes it stand
angle,
out, simply
because
for being a film that
that's sort of a
represents
lot of what the
zeitgeist
Joker
of the
is
time.
in a lot
My
of
major
ways.
takeaway
He
from the
is
story
sort
itself
of,
was this morbidly
you know, a
compelling
lost
depiction of
soul.
an innocent victim being pushed over the
Some people
edge
take it
by
too far, and it's like,
variables
oh
that
man,
were
he's an
effectively
artist, and it's like,
completely
no,
out
he's
of
still a
his control.
psychopath.
As you later find out, Arthur was adopted into an incredibly abusive household, so he really stood no chance from the beginning. As far as this concept goes of taking DC characters and grounding them in small-scale character studies, I do think it's the perfect contrast to Marvel. However, they're also trying to be Marvel at the same time, so I really don't understand who's wearing the hat over there. It is kind of confusing as an audience member what DC movies count and which don't, if you get what I'm saying. Besides, any kind of fresh take or direction is desperately needed and appreciated in this subgenre if they want to keep making these grotesque grotesque billion-dollar intakes. Can't all just copy each other forever. You gotta copy old movies now. Gotta go back into the vault. My biggest problem with the story by far is the inclusion of the imagined woman.
Okay,
which
so is
inherently
the
kind of predictable based on the
YouTube
realities
stream
of the
still
situation.
working?
I don't believe for a second that this woman and child would have anything to do with someone this blatantly terrifying.
Pretty sure it is.
I understand the choice to include it as an attempt to add a layer of confusion and sophistication. It just feels a little half-baked and unearned. I think with a tighter script, this could have been something I would have enjoyed a little bit more. But the surprising amount of relevance this film garners in these trying times is certainly an aspect that is beginning to grow on me. I'll be very interested to see how this film ages, because I really don't know what the read is going to be.
You just ask the same questions every week.
Joker has a lot of undeniably great things about it, but the overall package doesn't promote much emotion from me. I understand that it works for a lot of people as a standalone piece, but as I was leaving the theater for the first time, I
it's nice that at least they're
overhear
trying
some
something,
giddy
so...
members of the audience exclaim about how they cannot wait for a sequel to see how Batman deals with this problem.
No!
Which made me realize that there are simply so many ways to read this movie that I really do not feel the need to justify why I don't like it more than I do. If I do wind up watching this film again, it will probably be for that lead performance and the overall oppressive, hopeless feel of it, but I can't say it's an experience I'm vying for very often when I can just open up Twitter. I would recommend watching it though if you somehow haven't already. Even the prospect of a chance of an extreme reaction is a hell of a lot more to offer than
Hang tight for
many.
2 seconds, guys. I just gotta restart the stream here. I will be right back. After